All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's kind of rare that we as scholars get a chance to address the industry, and I appreciate every opportunity that I get. I'm glad that Burton's here too. He's very responsible for this research. And kind of the big key question that we wanted to talk about initially with what we were doing is, why don't people comment at the end of news stories? There's a theory that kind of comes along, and it was really popular back in the 70s, by a German researcher named Elisabeth Noelle Neumann, who said, you know what, one of the big reasons that people don't comment is they feel isolated. They don't feel like they're part of the majority opinion about the topic being discussed. And she kind of got this idea from riding trains. All right. She was riding trains, in Germany and saw, nobody's talking to each other. Everybody's got their nose in a newspaper or staring out the window. And this made us wonder, well, people still ride trains today, but they still don't talk. What do? Well, they're all on their cell phones, right? But does the cell phone, or more particularly in this instance, the advent of the internet that allows you to do some things that you couldn't normally do, things like be anonymous, things like make it so easy to comment, you just can whip out your phone and type a comment in. Has that kind of helped replace and get rid of these isolation effects that Noelle Neumann found? So that was kind of the key question of our study. And we decided one of the best places to study this would be news comments, because news generally tends to be about the opinions of the day. These are the things that a lot of people talk about. But it also represents an opportunity where news professionals, journalists like us in this room, can make a difference. They can do certain things to encourage that conversation. And this kind of goes back to, and I've heard this quoted in this conference, the key book by Tom, God, I can't think there, Kovich and Rosenstiel. Yeah, there you go, thank you. There's Bill Kovich and Tom Rosenstiel. There we go, sorry. Where they say, what is the goal of journalism? What are the elements of journalism? And one of the most important ones is they say journalism has to provide a public forum. It has to facilitate discussion among members of their communities. So are comments a place where this is happening? Comment forums are also a place where journalists can get involved. And they do lots of different things to ensure that comments remain civil, or that people are honest in their comments. These are things like requiring people to use their real names, requiring them to register before they can comment. Some news organizations even moderate the comments, where you have to go through a procedure to get approved, or not every comment is approved right away. I was at a news organization in Evansville, Illinois, and they had this intricate system where they tracked people who had commented and the reactions they'd gotten, and it was a way that they could automatically ban some people. So is this what news organizations need to be doing? And really, ultimately, do these things that they're doing make a difference when it comes to encouraging people to comment? To conduct this study, we were able to tap into a nationwide panel study. We used clear voice panels, and what a panel is, some of you have probably participated in them before. This is, you opt in, you say, I'm willing to take surveys if you give me a small reward, clear voice surveys. Sometimes, it's $1, sometimes it's a coupon or something like that. But these are people who opted in. The nice thing about a panel, though, is you have a lot more control of who you can get. And actually, Clear Voice has over 500,000 people across the United States that have said, we want to take these studies. So we thought this was a pretty good opportunity to tap into a nationwide audience and ask them about whether they comment at the end of news stories. So our two key questions were, do you read the comments? Do you post comments yourself? Okay? And why do you do that? We asked a number of different questions, both quantitative, both, hey, rate your level of agreement with this statement, and quantitative. Give us a few words about why you don't comment. This study really focuses on those quantitative responses, but I can share with you some of the qualitative responses if you choose. There are kind of some of them are pretty hilarious, honestly. And then we looked at specifically things that journalists can do that might make a difference in this, and what these panelists' responses to those comments were, or to those actions that journalists can take were. So we asked them, do you notice any moderation going? How important is it for you that people use their real names? How important is it you to have to register before you place a comment at the end of a news site? And basically what we found is that this idea of the spiral of silence, it still exists. And I say maybe persists is a better word than exists, because it's maybe less, but if you just look at the average number of people who said they commented, 18% said they never comment. Only 25% said they often did it, but our largest part of our sample here said, 57% said they very rarely comment. All right. And when we asked them why, and we looked at some of the quantitative things, these kind of 3 key points jumped out at us. And these are all the mean scores. Oh, it got a little messed up here, sorry. So, that they didn't comment because the story's point of view didn't match with theirs. Okay. They also found that the comments, the point of view of the other comments, didn't match with theirs, and that they don't really feel that strongly about the topic itself. These kind of 3 key measures, I think actually there's a 4th one, yeah. Sorry, if the comments had an aggressive tone, that was also one of the key things that we thought came together to say this spiral of silence, this feeling of isolation that you might have and that makes you not willing to comment still exists. So what we did is like, well, now what kind of difference can journalists make in this process? Are those measures that they typically take to ensure that comments remain civil and organized making a difference? So we just said, okay, can we predict what things go into if people feel this spiral of silence? One of the big key dimensions was age. And this is something that journalists unfortunately can't control, obviously. And it's something I think we're probably all familiar with in this. The younger people are, the less likely they were to feel this sense of isolation in the comment forums. But also, how important anonymity was to them. Those who said anonymity was really important actually experienced higher levels of this spiral of silence or this feeling of isolation than those who didn't think it was that important. We saw that same kind of pattern with their reactions to measures that journalists took to eliminate anonymity. And the credibility that offering comments at the end of a news story offered to that news organization. So again, the more that they thought comments added credibility to the news organization, the more likely they were to feel some sense of isolation and not be willing to comment themselves. And the other kind of key dimension, and this was kind of the strongest predictor out of all of them, if being able to add a comment at the end of a news story allowed them to feel a sense of community with the news organization, with the other people that were commenting. What this tells us is that, those people who have this high sense of isolation want these things. They want to see credibility in the news organization. They want to see this sense of community. And so we said, all right, do these things then in turn help us predict if people will end up using a comment themselves? And the strongest predictor in this kind of model that we put together was if they felt that they were isolated, they were very unlikely to comment. Okay? But procedures to eliminate anonymity made a difference too. Okay? But we also kind of in our findings noticed this kind of trend that you can't go too far in a sense. So they wanted to notice that moderation was going, notice that journalists had a presence in the conversation, but that they weren't controlling it necessarily. Because what they really wanted most of all, and what kind of made the biggest difference in whether they were willing to comment or not, was whether they experienced this sense of community. In fact, community tends to kind of paper over a lot of the other problems. So what are kind of the things that we found, the implications that we think this study has for journalists, is that they need to get involved. Readers really do notice when they are involved. But don't go too far, all right? Don't take it to the point where it's so hard to leave a comment that nobody's going to do that and nobody's going to go past those rules that you put up. That also relates to kind of the last point too, is that allowing people to be anonymous actually doesn't solve it. People still experience this sense of isolation, but the thing that does make a big difference is this idea of community, of bringing people together to kind of a common goal. And in fact, if people experience this sense of community, they were more likely to say that anonymity wasn't important to them. In some of other research that I've done, when there's this sense of community in an online forum, people actually kind of know who people are in any way, whether they're anonymous or not. And they look for other cues that help them kind of form a relationship with people. If you have any questions about these findings, there's our contact information. Thanks again for this opportunity.